Hello Bitcoiners, and welcome to a very special episode where I'm going to be talking about Bitcoin mining at home. And for reference, I'm going to be using my S9. So we'll be examining with my S9 the heat it creates, the noise it generates, the profit. Actually, it's the losses it makes, the electricity cost associated with how many satoshis I make on average, fine tuning it, where I purchased it. It's going to be a little bit of everything. So hopefully you find this video to be very informative if you're looking to mine Bitcoin at home. But if you could please like this video and also subscribe to the channel, it would help us out tremendously. So with that, I'm going to just transfer you over to the miner itself that's sitting in my garage. It's situated over there, hashing away. Initially, it was in my home, but yeah, you can get an idea what it looks like, what it sounds like, how it's set up, and it gives you an indication of how it's set up in my home, or technically not inside my home, outside my home, and we'll go from there. So here's the S9 doing its thing, hashing away, securing the network, and earning Bitcoin at the same time. So before I go any further, this is the 120 volt model. So simply just plug it into any outlet, and away you go. Make sure you have some power bar in between, to avoid power surges. But if you do get an S9, it's going to be in two pieces. You're going to have the actual ASIC miner here, and then you'll have the power unit, the power supply unit here. So it's two separate units. And how to hook it up? Well, you get these little plugs over here. So I'll try to get away from the light to make it easier. So it's these plugs here. So there's three here, 1, 2, 3, and that's on the first hash board. And then I'll try to get it over here. There's another 3 back here, 1, 2, 3, and then another 3 over there. So that's 3, 6, 9 of those little plugs, and then you got the 10th plug going over there, and that's how you hook up the power supply unit to the S9. And some people might be wondering why this is turned around backwards, because the front of it is over here, where you plug in the Ethernet cord, and it has the light on there saying the status, so it's hashing with if it's got the green light on it. Well, because I want the exhaust pointing to the main part of the garage, so it's already kind of warm in here, and it's as a result of the fact that it was a little bit of a warmer day, but mainly as a result of the S9. It creates some heat, a great deal of heat actually. So I just want to state that this was in my house before, and it was loud. I could hear it easily within the same room, and it was creating heat, and that was becoming, to me, concerning, because I didn't want it too warm in my basement, especially in the summertime. And maybe in the wintertime I may opt to bring this back inside, but then again I may want to opt to keep it out here, because outside here in the garage it gets really cold, and it's going to be advantageous for the miner to have a colder ambient temperature. So the elephant in the room for this really is just power consumption. We'll talk about that later. Noise, I'll talk about that now. And the heat, I'll also talk about that now. So the sound, it's all dependent on the fans. There's 2 fans here, and they're variable fans, and as it gets more warm in this room, and it's trying to cool the miners, cool the chips, that fan is going to ramp up. So it can get really, really loud if it's running close to near 100%. You obviously don't want that. Even if it's running at 30%, 35%, it's loud enough, it will be distracting in the same room. In the garage, I think it's running right now around 25 to 30%, and it's not too bad. But then again, it's in the garage, I don't really care. As for the heat, again, I mentioned before, in my house, it was getting warm, at least in the room where this was situated in. Here, don't really care. Let it get warm in the garage. In the summertime, it's going to be some problems I'm going to have to deal with. I might have to reduce the amount of power draw in this to make it run a little bit cooler. You can actually hear, as I'm speaking, the fan is spiking up a little bit. It's going a little bit, it's speeding up because it's getting warmer in this room, and it's trying to cool the equipment. So really, it's dead simple if you ever buy one. It's just a power supply unit, hook it up to the ASIC miner. Two wires. Once you get it all set up, it's going to be one wire. It's going to be the 120 volts wire. Is just a generic wire that you've seen if you operated any computer equipment, and then the RJ45, the Ethernet cable, because this does not run wirelessly. You have to have a direct hookup to anything. It's a direct wire. So that's it in a nutshell. It's not too bad in terms of noise where it is right now. It's not too bad in terms of heat, but then again, it is the garage. It's kind of out of the way. I don't really care what happens here in terms of noise or heat. Noise, I'm not really too concerned. Heat, if it gets too hot, I'm going to have to scale it back, but I'll be dealing with that problem later on as we approach summertime and the temperatures get into the 30s or higher Celsius. So there we go, and we'll just go to look at the software side. So you saw my S9 in action. Let's talk about where I purchased it, and where I got it from was a place called Kaboomracks. It's kaboomracks.com. Initiating the order is rather simplistic, but paying for it was not. I'll explain why. And when you go to the website, you just can't really simply order it from here. You have to actually use Telegram. So you could go to the marketplace to see what it is that they have there, or you go to the contact sales member. You could contact each sales member and then request what it is you want to buy. And in my case, I ordered an S9, the 120 volt model. There's both the 120 and 220 volt model. And when they accepted my order and started the process for my order and sent me an invoice, that's where it got a little complex, because they don't take credit card. They take Bitcoin, but I'm not paying my Bitcoin, especially now given the price is depressed around 29K US dollars. I used the money order option, so I went to my bank and sent the money order, and once they received the money, it took 2 to 3 days to be received once the shipment was initiated. So it didn't take too long. Once I got it, it was clean. It was ready to use. No issues on my end. There's a warranty that is included with it. So I like Kaboomracks because they test all the equipment. They ensure that Braiins OS is installed on it, which is really nice because it gives it a lot of flexibility. And it worked. I have no issues with my S9 that I ordered from Kaboom. Like, obviously, these are used pieces of equipment. You could get also other newer pieces of used equipment like S19s from them as well. So whatever's your fancy, you could have that ordered and delivered to your home. So I recommend Kaboomracks. It was relatively painless, except for the payment process, which I had to actually go to the bank, and gosh, everybody knows how much I don't like the bank. So yeah, so there we go. That's Kaboomracks, and I'm happy to say that's a good place to order your equipment. So I've mentioned Braiins OS, Braiins with 2 I's, mind you, so that's something to consider. This is the firmware or software that's going to be included. It overwrites the existing firmware on your S9 and also other equipment as well. You get like the S19 and S19 Pro, S19J, so there's a whole bunch of equipment that it works on. And thankfully, Kaboom was able to install it for me, so I didn't have to go through the hassle of doing it. But I don't think it's all that difficult. You can just simply look at the information, how it is to install, so you can read the documentation, how to do it. But what is this? What does it do? It gives you the option to fine tune and to enhance your ASIC mining equipment. And in this case, for the S9, you could increase the hash rate to 17 terahash per second. And that's an increase of 30%. And it's you also have the option to lower the power consumption and make things fine-tuned to your environment, to your setup. So that's really what I like. The auto-tuning process is rather slick. I'll show it to you in just a minute. So I do highly recommend installing Braiins if you can do that, because it just increases the efficiency of your miner, especially on the older equipment like the S9s, but really on the more the newer stuff, it's really going to make a massive difference. So Braiins OS, it's fantastic. It works well with Slush pool, so I recommend using Slush pool if you're going to be doing it, and also make sure that you're using the Stratum V2, because this reduces the overhead required to make the bandwidth much more efficient. So when you're loading up your miner, make sure you point to the Stratum V2 servers to maximize the efficiency of your ASIC miners. It only makes sense when using Braiins to use the Stratum V2 with Slush pool. So that's my experience with Braiins. Absolutely love it. Now I'm going to show you what it looks like. So I'll be logging in just a second. So this is Braiins OS when you first get it. It when you first log on to it, you're gonna have to put in your IP address here. So you find the IP address associated with your S9, and I found it when I looked at my router details. I logged on my router, looked at what was the one entry unit that looked like or appeared to be a mining unit, and it gave me this IP address internally. So I plugged that in. Username and password when you log on to a Braiins OS loaded system is root and root. So root is the password, root is the username, and you should be able to get in without any hitches. And so when you first log on, you see all the information. It's been running for a week and change, but I had a bit of a internet downage yesterday by a couple of minutes, which unfortunately screwed things up with my miner. It then reset itself back to base, and it's trying to find the best configuration with auto tune. It was running really well up until that point. So right now the real-time hash rate is 11.5 to 11.5. So that's what it's hashing out right now. The temperature, you can see it's trying to hover around 80 Celsius. That's my target. The estimated efficiency is around 82 watts per terahash, and that's changing depending on that real-time hash rate. And the power usage is pretty stagnant at 948 watts. It's maxing out at 950. You can see the pool status is active. The tuner status is stable. So it's found something that is a configuration that really works well. The fan speed and a whole bunch of other things. You see the 3 different boards here. Each board has 63 chips on it, and their chip temperatures you can see here are 78, 79, and 83 or 80 Celsius respectively. You can see that the board temperature, the voltage each board draws, the real-time hash rate. So AutoTune, it configures all this to make it as the most efficient as possible, so that your hash rate is going to be as high as possible, but also your estimated efficiency will be as low as possible. That's what Braiins OS is all about. If you don't have Braiins OS, highly recommend it. It is highly configurable. So let's go down and take a look to see what's at the bottom here. So at the bottom of the screen, you could take a look what we have. Again, you have the 3 different hash boards, but this is the Stratum v2 URL. That's where you log on, and it also gives you an indication what's going on with your boards itself. It's doing a whole bunch of iterations to find the best one, the best setup that works for each board, because each board functions independently. And you can see this last stage is 1 day and 13 hours old. So that's essentially around the time I had my downage of internet for a period of time, because the system has been up and running for 1 week and 3 days since I moved it from my basement to my garage. And so it's just trying to find the right configuration to maximize the real-time hash rate. So really cool stuff. I like how Braiins set things up, and it just makes things so simplistic. And it just works. It just really works. So yeah, let's go back to the top. So here, yeah, going back to the top, you could see that so the temperature I just mentioned earlier is around 80 Celsius. So these are the things you're fine tuning. You're essentially just fine tuning the temperature and the power usage. So if we go to configuration, and before I go further, this is where you enter your pool URL, so the Stratum v2, your username, and then your password is blank. So when you go to performance, that's when you find out what you could enter for the power. So you can see it's 950 is the maximum wattage I have selected for this. You could do higher, so the default is 1420 watts, and it maxes out at 5,000 watts, so 5 kilowatts. That's quite a bit. So at 1.4 kilowatts, it was running a lot louder, and the efficiency wasn't as high. I was getting mining more Bitcoin, but it was at the at the cost of more power. So I've reduced the power consumption to 950 watts maximum, and my watts per terahash was decreased as a result. So it's getting more efficient, and I suspect if I reduce this even further, I'll be able to further maximize my estimated efficiency to make this even more efficient, but I'll do it at the expense of the amount of Bitcoin I can mine. And the other thing I adjusted here was the temperature. So you see the temperature is 80 Celsius. That's the target temperature that it's trying to achieve. And I think default was, when I got it, was 85, and it says 89 as a default, but it had 85 plugged in. So I lowered it at 5 Celsius just to give it a little bit more of a buffer, so it's not running as hot as what it I guess should be. And so that's what it's trying to achieve. It's trying to get the chips to 80 Celsius, the hot temperature, and dangerous. I left it alone at 90 and 100 respectively. So to go back, so you see the target temperature at 80. Well, there it is. It's trying to achieve 80 Celsius. If I change that to even higher, then it's going to be 81, 82, whatever my target is, and that impacts the fans here. You can see the fans will increase as the temperature goes beyond 80 Celsius, and the fans will decrease when it goes below 80 Celsius in this configuration. And this percentage is, I mentioned earlier, that's how fast the fans are running. And depending on the ambient temperature, this changes. If it's cold outside, if it's around 10, 15 degrees, these are running at around 13, 14%. So it's really quiet. And I suspect it's going to get past 30% overall as temperature climbs up outside, because it is rather warm today. I think it's around 25-ish, and it's going to get even warmer through the summer. So I suspect this is going to get rather high, and it's going to get rather loud as a result. And so the second one I showed you was the power usage. Well, there you go. The power usage here was my maximum. And so that impacts this, and the temperature impacts the noise. That's it in a nutshell. Love Braiins OS. You can fine tune it a million different ways to whatever you see it best. You could reduce the power usage, and this would probably reduce this number here. So you're going to be much more efficient, but at the cost of your the amount of Bitcoin you can mine. In this configuration, how much Bitcoin am I mining? Well, let's take a peek. So here's Slush Pool. I've logged into it, and it's showing me what is my hash rate. It's showing I have two workers here. I can show you what it is. One is my S9. The other one is just a tiny USB miner that I have. It's really doing absolutely nothing. It draws very, very little power. It's mining maybe a SAT a day or something. I don't know what the number is, but I threw it in, so it's just contributing to the overall greater good here. So going back to the dashboard, it shows you what's the hash rate. So it's a little bit less than 10 terahash per second. So before I had my little bit of my power, my internet outage for a few minutes, this was beyond 12 continuously. So, which was really nice. And so I can't wait for it to get back up again. So scrolling down, you could see really how much I've earned. It shows me the estimated earnings around 4,754 BTC a day. That's the estimated, but you could see I've been running this since the 13th. I know it says the 14th. That's what I was awarded, but the day before I started was the 13th, and to date I got so far 78,000, 79,000 satoshis. Not too shabby, and it varies day to day depending on how many blocks are found. So these are all the blocks found by Slush Pool. They're not the biggest, not even close to being one of the biggest Bitcoin mining pools out there. So there's going to be periods of time where they don't find any Bitcoin, they don't find any blocks, but if they find lots of them, you get rewarded more. So you can see the best date the best payout I've received in a day. Let me just take a look. Yeah, so it's 7,130 sats in a day. And the lowest I've gotten was 3,500. That's the lowest. Is it anything lower than that? No, this one's no 3,500. So 3,500 seems to be around the lowest that I've, or 3,000. This is a little bit lower. So 3,000. So that's the variation. As low as 3,000, as high as a little bit past 7 grand sats. That's not too bad. And you could ramp this up even higher if you increase your power consumption, which of course is going to cost you the efficiency, but who cares? If your goal is to get as many satoshis as possible, ramp it up to the maximum power. If your goal is to get more efficient, scale back the power usage, and maybe even get to a point where it's even below 950 as per mine setup. So that's it. I mean, I'll do some more videos like this going forward. If you have any questions, just post it below. I'll be happy to answer them. And yeah, I mean, I hope that whatever you do with Bitcoin mining, it's worthwhile for you. Certainly it was fun for me to learn about this. Oh, I have to just mention before we go any further. This is going to be kind of tough to talk about, but it is right now, in its current state, it is not profitable. And the reason being is the price of Bitcoin holding around $29,000 means that the S9 is not a profitable endeavor. I think based on the power rates in Ontario, based on my calculation, it becomes profitable beyond 42,000 US dollars. So if the price of Bitcoin is beyond 42,000 US dollars, then the S9 becomes profitable. Doesn't mean that it's not always going to be not profitable, because if you mine Bitcoin now at a reduced rate of the price of Bitcoin, you're mining it, but you're holding on to it, and you could deal with it once the price of Bitcoin moves up even higher. So if the price of Bitcoin goes to 50,000 US or even beyond that, then the S9 is theoretically profitable. But also you have to take into consideration two other things. Number one, well, three other things. Number one is the price of energy changes periodically. So depending on if it goes up over time, which it tends to do, or down, which might happen in Ontario. They're talking about overnight rates of 2.5 kilocents per hour, 2.5 kilowatt per hour. So it's going to be really, really cheap in terms of energy usage in Ontario if that rate does go into effect. Another thing to consider is the halving that's going to happen moving forward with the Bitcoin. There's going to be another halving in less than 2 years, and that means the amount of Bitcoin that you're going to be mining is going to be less than 2 years. So that's something to also to consider. And the third thing is you're paying up front for the miner. In my case, I paid $450 US all in, and it was shipped at that price. So that's like 600 and change Canadian. So you have to take this into consideration when you are doing your when you're doing the mining, because this is another variable you're gonna have to include, and I haven't yet included in my charts here. Shoot, one more thing that came up is the mining fees on Slush Pool. If you use Braiins OS equipment, it's not, you're not gonna be charged mining fees, and normally it's 2%. And the reason why they're not charging it is Braiins OS and Slush Pool are the same company. So they're not charging any mining fees to anybody that uses Braiins OS equipment on their pool, which is really neat. It's 2% that you're saving. And also, when you withdraw from Slush Pool, if you withdraw less than 1 million satoshis, it's you're paying, what is the number? 10,000 satoshis as a fee. Is that what it is? So if you, and the minimum withdrawal is 100,000 satoshis. So if you mine 100,000 satoshis, you could withdraw that into your wallet. That's KYC free, of course. But you're paying 10,000 satoshis as a fee. That's essentially 10%. So you don't want to withdraw at the 100,000 satoshi mark, because you're making everything 10% more costly. It's like essentially 10% more energy, or you're mining 10% less Bitcoin, whatever it is. It's making it less efficient for you. It's best for you to wait to get to the 1 million satoshi mark, because then you could withdraw without getting the 10,000 satoshi fee for withdrawal. And it takes, from what I gather here, it's going to take around 6 or 7 months continuous use to get the 1 million satoshis. I think it's around 3 weeks to get to 100,000 satoshis. So if I recall correctly, it's around 6-7 months to get to 1 million satoshis, which isn't bad. That gives me 3 withdrawal periods, but if the hash rate remains relatively consistent, before the next halving. So I should be able to, as long as that, as things don't go nuts with the hash rate, and it probably will though, it should be able to net me close to 3 million satoshis before the halving, which is not bad. It's 3% of a Bitcoin, all KYC. So really cool stuff. So again, I hope you find this informative. It's a lot to digest, and if you have any questions, let me know. If you are thinking about starting a miner or start to mine at home, it's getting to the point where it's, with an S9, it's really, really costly to do so, and I may not recommend it, but it's a fun project to do. If you're doing something more efficient like an S19, probably it's something you should consider, because it might be worthwhile. It might be profitable. Maybe the upfront cost is rather high, but the cost, the heat that it creates, the noise it creates, it's a heck of a lot more than an S9. So that's something you're gonna have to deal with a more robust mining equipment than say an S9. But nonetheless, that's what I have to say. Hope you enjoy it. Any questions, comments, concerns, whatever, just write them below. And I'm gonna do another video in a few weeks just to do an update to show you what it's all about. So I hope you found this informative, and take care.